Imagine a force so quiet that it never announces itself, yet so persistent that it shapes the direction of your life without asking for permission. A force that slips into your thoughts when your guard is down, that bends your attention, that colors your memories and quietly decides what you chase and what you avoid. It does not arrive as an enemy. It arrives as comfort. It arrives as excitement. It arrives as relief. And because it feels good at first, you never question its cost. This force is not loud or violent. It does not need to be. It works best when it feels natural, when you mistake it for your own will. This is the force that has ruled men who believe themselves powerful, that has humbled geniuses who believe themselves immune, that has hollowed out entire cultures while convincing them they were progressing. This force is lust, but not in the narrow sense you've been taught to think of it. Lust is not merely sexual desire. It is the deeper hunger to escape yourself, to fill an inner absence with stimulation, to avoid the silence where truth waits. Lust disguises itself as pleasure, but its real function is control. Captures your attention and scatters your energy, pulls you out of the present moment and locks you into endless anticipation. It promises satisfaction just beyond the next indulgence, and when that satisfaction never arrives, it convinces you the problem is that you haven't consumed enough yet. One more image, one more fantasy, one more hit of excitement, one more distraction to dull the ache you don't want to name. And so the cycle repeats. Not because you are weak, but because you are human and untrained. Lust thrives where awareness is absent. It feeds on unconsciousness. It grows stronger the less you look at it directly. Think about how often your mind drifts toward craving when you feel bored, anxious, lonely, or uncertain. Notice how desire intensifies when you are tired or emotionally depleted. Lust does not usually arise from abundance. It arises from lack. It arises when something inside you feels empty, disconnected, or restless. And rather than addressing the root of that restlessness, lust offers a shortcut. It offers stimulation instead of meaning, sensation instead of connection, escape instead of presence. For a moment, the discomfort fades. For a moment, the mind is occupied. But afterward, something feels off. A subtle drain, a quiet dissatisfaction, a sense that you've given something away without receiving anything lasting in return. Ancient thinkers understood this long before neuroscience gave it language. They observed that when desire rules the mind, reason becomes its servant. The Stoics warned that a person who cannot govern their impulses will always be governed by external forces. Plato described the soul as a chariot pulled by competing horses, one noble and one unruly, and taught that without discipline, the chariot is dragged wherever appetite leads. These were not moral judgments. They were psychological observations. When impulse leads, clarity disappears. When craving dominates, freedom erodes. Not all at once, but gradually, invisibly, until reaction replaces choice. Modern life has refined lust into a science. Algorithms track what holds your gaze and feed it back to you in increasingly potent forms. Images are engineered to bypass thought and trigger instinct. Novelty is endless, frictionless, and available at any moment of weakness. This constant stimulation keeps your nervous system on edge, always seeking the next hit of dopamine, always restless, rarely satisfied. The result is not happiness but dependency, not fulfillment but numbness. What once excited you becomes normal. What once felt intense becomes dull. And so you need more but enjoy it less. This is not pleasure. This is captivity wearing the mask of choice. Neuroscience confirms what sages intuited. Each indulgence strengthens a neural pathway. Each repetition makes the impulse easier to follow and harder to resist. Dopamine spikes reward the behavior, but the brain quickly adapts, lowering its baseline of satisfaction. Over time, you feel less joy in ordinary moments. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels empty. You reach for stimulation not because you are joyful, but because you are restless. Lust becomes an escape hatch from discomfort, a way to avoid sitting with yourself. And the longer this pattern continues, the more foreign true presence feels. Yet lust is not inherently evil. Desire itself is not the enemy. Desire is energy. It is the raw force that drives creation, connection, ambition, and growth. The problem is not desire, but distortion. When desire is unconscious, it becomes compulsive. When it is hijacked by fantasy and escapism, it loses its capacity to create and begins to consume. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He saw libido not merely as sexual drive, but as the fundamental energy of the psyche. When this energy is repressed, it becomes neurosis. When it is indulged without awareness, it becomes addiction. But when it is brought into consciousness and integrated, it becomes transformation. Jung taught that what you do not confront within yourself will control you from the shadows. Lust thrives in those shadows. It feeds on secrecy, shame, and denial. When you refuse to look at your cravings honestly, they gain power over you. But when you observe them without judgment, something changes. The spell weakens. Awareness creates space. And in that space, choice becomes possible again. This is the beginning of mastery. Not suppression, but integration. Not moralizing, but understanding. Many spiritual traditions speak of restraint, not as punishment, but as a pathway to clarity. In Buddhism, craving is identified as the root of suffering, not because pleasure is forbidden, but because attachment to pleasure creates dissatisfaction. In Hindu philosophy, vital energy is seen as something to be preserved and refined, not wasted through compulsive indulgence. In Christian mysticism, lust is described as a veil that clouds spiritual vision, not because the body is sinful, but because obsession with sensation distracts from deeper truth. Across cultures and centuries, the message repeats in different languages but with the same core insight. When desire is unconscious, it enslaves. When it is understood, it liberates. To overcome lust does not mean to eliminate desire. It means to reclaim authority over it. It means learning to sit with the urge without immediately acting on it. It means feeling the tension in the body, the pull in the mind, and choosing to remain present. This is not easy. The urge may feel overwhelming at first. It may demand release. But if you stay with it, if you breathe, if you observe, you begin to notice something unexpected. The urge peaks, then fades. Like a wave, it rises, crests, and falls. You realize that you are not the urge. You are the awareness watching it. And that realization changes everything. Viktor Frankl spoke of the space between stimulus and response, the space where human freedom resides. Lust collapses that space, pushing you into automatic reaction. Awareness restores it. When you pause and ask yourself what you are truly seeking in that moment, the answer is rarely just pleasure. Often it is comfort, or connection, or validation, or relief from boredom or anxiety. When you see this clearly, the craving loses its disguise. It is no longer an irresistible command. It becomes information, a signal pointing to an unmet need. This is where transmutation begins. Instead of discharging the energy through fantasy or indulgence, you redirect it. The same energy that fuels lust can fuel creativity, focus, and purpose. When you stop leaking energy through constant stimulation, it begins to accumulate. Concentrated energy sharpens the mind. It deepens attention. It strengthens presence. This is why so many artists, inventors, and thinkers have spoken of discipline during their most productive periods. Not because they rejected life, but because they chose depth over distraction. When lust loosens its grip, something subtle but profound occurs. The mind becomes quieter. The body feels more grounded. Ordinary moments regain their color. You begin to notice details you once rushed past. Conversations deepen. Relationships shift. You stop relating to others as objects of desire or sources of validation, and start encountering them as whole beings. Lust seeks to take. Intimacy seeks to understand. Lust consumes images. Love meets presence. Without lust distorting perception, connection becomes cleaner, freer, less burdened by expectation. This shift also transforms how you relate to yourself. Much of lust is fueled by shame and self-rejection. The urge to escape arises when parts of yourself feel unworthy of attention or care. When you bring compassion to those parts instead of avoidance, the need for escape diminishes. You begin to see that the hunger driving lust is often a hunger for acceptance, for wholeness, for rest. St. Augustine wrote of a restlessness of the heart, a longing that no sensory pleasure could satisfy. That restlessness is not a flaw. It is a signal pointing beyond temporary gratification toward something enduring. To overcome lust, then, is not to become less human. It is to become more human. It is to reclaim the capacity to feel deeply without being driven blindly, to experience desire without being owned by it, to stand in the presence of temptation without abandoning yourself. This is not repression. Repression hardens and fractures the psyche. This is integration. It softens and unifies. When desire is integrated, it matures. It no longer screams for attention. It becomes a quiet force that can be directed toward love, creation, and service. The world, however, profits from your distraction. Consumer culture depends on dissatisfaction. Advertising thrives on insecurity. Endless novelty keeps you chasing rather than arriving. Lust, in this broader sense, is the engine that keeps the machine running. It keeps you outward-focused, perpetually seeking fulfillment in objects, images, and experiences. When you stop chasing, when you become present, the machine loses its hold. You no longer need to be constantly entertained. You no longer need to numb yourself. You begin to taste a different kind of satisfaction, one that does not spike and crash, but steadies and deepens. This is why overcoming lust is not merely a personal victory. It is an act of quiet rebellion. It is a refusal to be manipulated by forces that benefit from your restlessness. It is the reclaiming of sovereignty over your attention, your energy, your inner life. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that the one who cannot obey himself will be commanded by others. When you cannot master your impulses, something else will master you. Trends, habits, appetites, the expectations of the crowd. But when you learn self-governance, you become less predictable, less controllable, more free. Freedom, in this sense, is not the ability to indulge every impulse. It is the ability to choose in alignment with your highest values. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction, but at its core, it is alignment. It is choosing what serves your deeper purpose over what offers momentary relief. This kind of discipline does not feel heavy or oppressive. It feels clarifying. It simplifies your life. It reduces internal conflict. You no longer waste energy negotiating with yourself. Your actions begin to flow from intention rather than compulsion. As lust fades from the center of your inner world, something else takes its place. Presence. Presence is not flashy. It does not promise thrills, but it offers something far more valuable: peace. In presence, you are no longer trying to escape the moment. You are inhabiting it fully. You feel your breath. You feel your body. You feel your emotions without needing to numb or exaggerate them. This presence is what mystics across traditions have pointed to as the gateway to freedom. Not some distant state, but a return to what has always been here. The final illusion of lust is that it tells you fulfillment lies elsewhere, in the future, in the next experience, in the next conquest. Presence reveals that fulfillment is only ever available now. When you stop running from yourself, when you stop chasing sensations to fill an inner void, you discover that the void was never empty. It was simply unattended. Lust dissolves not because you fought it, but because you outgrew it. Like a child who no longer needs a toy, you see through the promise and no longer reach for it. This is what it means to overcome the world. Not to withdraw from it, not to reject pleasure or beauty, but to move through it without being possessed by it. To enjoy without clinging. To desire without losing yourself. To engage without being enslaved. The world loses its power over you when you no longer need it to complete you. When you find wholeness within, external things regain their proper place. They become experiences to be appreciated, not crutches to lean on. The path is not instant. It requires patience, honesty, and repeated choice. There will be moments of relapse, moments of forgetting. This is part of being human. Mastery is not perfection. It is commitment. Commitment to awareness. Commitment to presence. Commitment to returning to yourself again and again. Each time you choose awareness over reaction, you strengthen a different neural pathway. Each time you stay with discomfort instead of escaping, you build resilience. Slowly, quietly, your inner landscape changes. And one day, you notice something surprising. The urges that once dominated your attention no longer feel urgent. The images that once pulled you no longer hook you. The restlessness that once drove you has softened into a steady sense of being at home in yourself. You are not numb. You are alive. More alive than before, because your energy is no longer scattered. It is gathered, focused, directed. This is the deeper power hidden within the act of overcoming lust. It is not about moral superiority. It is about liberation. It is about reclaiming your life force and using it consciously. When you do this, you don't just change your habits. You change your destiny. You become someone who acts from clarity rather than compulsion, from purpose rather than impulse. And that shift radiates outward. It affects your work, your relationships, your presence in the world. The world does not need more people chasing pleasure. It needs more people rooted in awareness, more people capable of stillness, more people who can stand in the midst of temptation and choose truth over escape. When you cultivate this capacity within yourself, you contribute something rare and valuable. You become a stabilizing presence in a restless culture. You embody a different rhythm, one that invites others to slow down, to breathe, to remember themselves. So ask yourself quietly and honestly what you are ready to let go of. Not out of shame, but out of respect for your own potential. Ask yourself what kind of life you want to live, one ruled by craving or one guided by meaning. Each moment offers this choice. Each moment is an opportunity to return to yourself. When you choose presence again and again, lust loses its hold, and something deeper takes root. A sense of inner freedom that no image, no fantasy, no fleeting pleasure could ever replace. This is not the end of desire. It is its maturation. Desire refined into purpose. Energy directed toward creation rather than consumption. Love freed from possession. Pleasure grounded in presence. When you reach this point, you understand the ancient insight not as an idea, but as lived truth. Whoever overcomes lust does not become empty. He becomes whole. And in that wholeness, the world no longer rules him. He walks through it awake, unbound, and free.